System integration model. We discussed the flow charting in our previous module and as well as the algorithm. For the lesson preview, algorithms and flowchart are powerful tools for learning programming. An algorithm is a step-by-step analysis of the process, while a flowchart explains the steps of a program in a graphical way. A flowchart is a graphical representation of an algorithm. Programmers often use it as a program planning tool to solve a problem. Algorithms are step-by-step procedures to solve the problem. Flowchart is a diagram created by different shapes to show the flow of data. On the other hand, we also tackle the importance of the pseudocode in writing a program. Pseudocode is an artificial and informal language that helps programmers develop algorithms. Pseudocode is a text-based detailed algorithmic design tool that rules of pseudocode are reasonably straightforward. All statements showing dependency are to be indented. This includes while, do, and for, and if, and switch. For the main lesson of this module, alright, so are you still with me or are you still okay? So for more theories on the system integration and architecture are coming soon. Alright, so just kidding. So you can use most of the system integration parts in your system analysis and design and in our software engineering subjects. Again, the preparation for that is toning of what you have learned in your programming 1 and 2. It doesn't matter if like you are using Java, C#, Python, C++, and other programming languages. The principle of programming is simple. You need to understand the data types, data literals, the basic of input-output, control, iteration, and recursion. Also, exemption and interface. Yun lang yun. Because if your preparation is not enough, going to a high-end subject like SIA or System Integration and Architecture, SAD or System Analysis and Design, and Super Engineering is useless. So you need to know the enough preparation for this coming subject. Writing codes requires the basic steps of knowing the statement of the problem. With that note, I am integrating the various real applications with programming in system integration and architecture. The steps are quite rhetorical or rather rhetorical. Ano ba yung rhetoric na yan? It's like the explanation is very scholarly. Kung tingnan, simple lang naman yan. System integration and architecture is an eye-opener to create your system. For you who are taking this subject, there is an advantage to those who were not able to get the system integration and architecture. Why? The recipes of SIA can give an expanded version of preparing startups projects, mini thesis, R&D, research and development, capstone and research, and among others. So let's dive now to the SI models or system integration models. We understand system integration to be the embedding of existing and new IT systems into an existing IT environment. Embedding can take place in-house, where we generate interfaces to other IT systems with the organization, whether the IT system that need to be integrated in existing infrastructure and processes are within the organization, or external plays a minor role from a modeling perspective. Integration of an IT system requires knowledge about the environment of the IT system and its borders. The basis for this is the business system model, which we constructed and described in modeling business system. In order for an IT system to cooperate efficiently with other IT system, interfaces have to be generated to in-house IT system as well as to the IT systems of other organizations. To get familiar with SI integration or system integration, let's first discuss the jargon terms or para meron kayong idea. So first is the interface. So what is an interface? Okay, so communication between IT system occurs through interfaces. So therefore, an interface is the basic element of the system integration. Through an interface, an IT system or the sender sends information to another IT system or the receiver. A particular IT system can be both a sender and a receiver. So for the message, IT systems that are connected via interfaces exchange messages. A message is sent by the sender IT system with the expectation that receiving the message immediately or later initiates an activity in the receiver. IT system for the receiver, IT system and message received constitutes an event to which it responds. For instance, if an invoice is sent in an electronic format, this event is an invoice receipt for the receiver for the invoice. After the receipt of the invoice, the receiver has a certain time frame to pay the bill. The receiver IT system has to confirm the receipt of the invoice and possibly activate another IT system. For example, an accounting system that records the balance. Also, message can be loaded with additional information that is necessary to process the activities of the receiver system. Generally, this information is structured data with defined semantics such as invoice data or a passenger list. Enterprise application integration incorporates methods, concepts, and tools for the classification, connection, and coordination of application within organization. This network constantly changes through upgrades or by adding of new applications through modified technology and other influences. One of the prerequisites for reaching this goal is the documentation of business processes of the application network of the individual application and their interfaces, which should be as unified in form and display as possible. UML is almost perfect for this task. What is an UML? It is a unified model language. I am pretty sure that this was discussed in your programming too. So now let's continue. So what is electronic data interchange? The term electronic data interchange or EDI rather, is a synonym for the standardized exchange of business documents that includes order, delivery, invoice, shipping, information, etc. So between the IT system of the organization and institutions such as suppliers or the customs authority, business documents are also referred to as the message. So for the UN EDFAC, so what's that? United Nations Electronic Data for Administration, Commerce and Transport, or also known as UN/EDIFACT, is an international standard for electronic data exchange in administration, economics, and transportation, which includes the rules and messages or message types. With the frame of the Unified Nations Economic Commissions for Europe or an ECE, the ONU aimed at supporting global commerce with electronic tools. In several places throughout the chapter, we will refer to the AN EDIFA. There are several reasons for this. Alright, so now what is an XML? In your web fundamentals or in your computing, I think this term was mentioned by your instructor. So what is an XML? Extensible markup language is used to describe data. The XML standard is a flexible way to create information formats and electronically share structured data via the public internet as well as the via corporate networks. So later in the upcoming projects-based discussion, we can use the XML, parang HTML pero ginagamit sa pag-convert ng data na maging contextual.
To model simple processes, not many model elements are necessary. We need the activity, actions, decisions, and merge elements. All these elements can be found under these names in the toolbox for the UML activity diagram. We distinguish decision and merge based on incoming and outgoing control flows. One inbound and several outbound control flows represent a decision. Several outgoing and one incoming control flow represent a merge. UML allows you to use one decision as a merge and can therefore have multiple inbound and outbound control flows. However, such models become confusing and difficult to read. I therefore recommend to model as explicitly as possible and to always create a separate model element for a merge, even if the diagram becomes somewhat larger as a result. The diagram is certainly more understandable. In this tutorial, I show you how to create such a simple activity diagram describing a process of authentication for an ATM and how to interpret it. As usual, I will create a separate package, which I will give it a name, a simple activity, and I will keep the option create diagram. Here I'm gonna select the simple activity. Let me get to it, what it means. When I open a diagram, I see a simple activity toolbox having a limited amount of items. If I want to see the complete toolbox, I can do that by changing the value in an applied meta model like this. This comes in handy, especially for our example, because we don't want to deal with all the elements. Okay, let's start with creating and closing activity authenticate, which describes the process of PIN authentication. The activity diagram usually starts with an activity initial. Then I'm going to use a quick linker to create a first action, and this action will have a name setCounter. This counter will have a variable which will be in effect counter set to 3. Save and show effect in the diagram to make it visible in the diagram. Again, I'm going to use a quick linker to create another model element, but this time this is going to be a decision, playing role as a merge. You should know by now what's the difference between merge and decision. So then, using the same procedure, I will create 2 more actions, query pin and enter pin. As a next step, I'm going to create an object flow between enter pin and verify pin actions. If an object flow is created from one action to another action, EA automatically generates an action pin at each end of the object flow. This is a comfort function. At the action enter pin, we see a so-called action pin. It represents data, in our case the pin, that will be picked up and checked by the next action verify pin. The same action we have to do for the verify pin action. So change the name to P and assign the pin as a type. The action verify pin contains another action pin. When checking the pin in the action, not only the pin is included as data object, new data is also generated. In this case, a variable of type boolean with the name success. This data is passed to an output parameter of the activity. In addition to output parameters, we can also use input parameters to pass data to our process and send data back to the process caller when the process is complete. After verify pin, we know if the pin is correct or not. With the decision without the name, we can now decide which further path to take. At the outgoing control flows, we see guard condition in squared brackets. The guard condition contains a logical expression that can be true or false. We can write little formally free text or more formally use a logical expression as in programming language. In our example, we query the value of the action pin success. If the value of the variable success is false, we go to another decision to check the value of the variable counter. Since the variable counter already exists and has a value, we do not need any further action between. We can check the value now. If the value of success is greater than 0, the value of the success variable is reduced by 1. If the variable counter has been lowered, we return this branch of the process and have thus defined the loop. The merge model element is important here. If we let the control flow be shown directly into the action query pin, the model would be semantically wrong. If the variable counter is already set to 0, we will retain the card and end the process. The output parameter identification success still has the value false, and we passed it to the caller of authenticate. To tie up the lines in the diagram, you can use this trick. First, I will select a line style orthogonal square for one line, and then I will apply the line style on a diagram of the same type, just like that. And here we go, the diagram looks better. If you want to review your diagram, I highly suggest to use the context filter. Once enabled, it is possible to click on any element on the diagram and show only those elements that are directly related to the selected element. All other elements are grayed out until you click on the diagram background.
Alright, so that's the end of the content notes. So for the skill building, we have separated discussion for this as well as for the checking for understanding. So for the frequently asked question, so the question is there any other alternative aside from XML to send a message? So the answer is yes, of course. So you can use JSON or JavaScript object notation. Alright, so thank you so much everyone for joining and have a nice day.